I would rather burn than belong to you. Then stand with me, not beneath me.
The chain was cold. That was the first thing Lira noticed. Not the rain hammering her skin, not the mud pressing against her knees, not even the jeering voices of soldiers behind her. It was the cold of iron wrapped around her wrists, biting deeper than the storm itself. She had been a scout for the Sylvari border guard for 6 years. She had never once been caught. Until last night. The village of Thornwall had fallen in hours. The Valdric army swept through the eastern pass like a tide that had been gathering for a generation. And when the fire started, Lira had run the wrong way, toward the sound of crying children rather than toward the forest that might have saved her. They found her pulling a human girl from beneath a collapsed beam. They had laughed at the elf with the pointed ears and the defiant eyes, and they had put iron on her wrists while the child ran free. That, at least, had been worth it. Now she was being led through the gates of Fort Ashenmere, a fortress carved from black stone at the foot of the Dravik Mountains, and the soldiers behind her were already arguing over what she was worth. Spoils of war. One of them called her, his voice loud enough to carry over the rain. A fighter, they say. Commander Aldric will enjoy that. She did not flinch at the name. She had heard of Commander Aldric Vorne. Every soldier on both sides of the border had. He was 32 years old, a decorated officer who had never lost a battle, a man carved from discipline and strategy. The stories differed on whether he was cruel. She supposed she would find out. They brought her to a stone hall lit by torches that hissed in the damp air. At the far end of a long table, a man stood with his back to her, studying a map pinned beneath iron weights. He was taller than she had imagined, broad-shouldered, wearing no armor now, only a dark wool tunic, his dark hair still wet from the same rain that had soaked her through. When he turned, his face was harder than she expected, but younger somehow. His gray eyes moved over her once, clinical and quick, and then settled on the soldiers behind her. "Leave us," he said. The soldiers exchanged glances. "Commander, she's dangerous. I am aware of what she is." His voice did not rise. It simply closed the argument. Boots scraped against stone, and then the door shut, and Lira stood alone in the torchlight with a man who now owned her by the ugly mathematics of conquest. She lifted her chin. "If you're waiting for me to beg, you'll be waiting a long time." He looked at her for a moment, as if she had said something unexpected. Then, slowly, he moved to the table's edge and poured 2 cups of something hot from a clay pot. He set one at the near end of the table. "Sit down," he said. "You're soaked and you're cold, and whatever happens next, it won't be decided tonight." She didn't move. "I won't be your servant. I haven't asked you to be." He pulled out a chair and sat in his own, wrapping both hands around his cup. "Sit down, Lira of the Sylvari border guard. I've read your file. You saved a child last night instead of running. The least I can do is offer you something warm." The sound of her own name, spoken plainly without mockery, undid something small and rigid inside her chest. She crossed the room and sat, keeping her back straight, her eyes on him like a blade that hadn't decided whether to cut. They didn't speak much that night, but she drank the tea. The weeks that followed were nothing like she had prepared herself for. Aldric did not put her to work in the kitchens or the stables. He gave her a room with a lock and gave her the key herself, which struck her as either trust or arrogance, and she spent 3 days deciding which. He had her chains removed the morning after her arrival, citing, with no apparent emotion, that shackled prisoners were inefficient. She suspected there was more to it than efficiency. She began to notice small things. The way he dismissed officers who spoke of the Sylvari with contempt. The way he read late into the night. Not military texts, but histories, philosophy, the kind of books that collected on shelves and gathered dust in the houses of men who thought themselves too busy for questions. He was not what she had been told he was. She was not sure yet what he actually was. She started helping him, at first out of sheer boredom. She corrected a tactical error in a border map he was reviewing, marked it in the margin with a short, sharp note, and left it on the table without explanation. He read it the next morning without comment, and by afternoon the error had been corrected on every copy in the fort. Neither of them mentioned it. But after that, the door between her room and the main hall was left open in the evenings, and there was always a second candle lit at the table. It was midwinter when everything shifted. A messenger arrived from the Valdra capital with orders that made Aldric's jaw tighten in a way she had learned to read. She was standing nearby when he dismissed the messenger and stood alone with the letter, and when she asked what it said, he told her the truth instead of lying. The capital wanted her sent south. A political prisoner, they said, useful for leverage. He told her this, and then he set the letter down, and he looked at her directly in the way he rarely did, not the quick, strategic glance of a commander assessing a situation, but something slower and far more honest. "I won't do it," he said. "I want you to know that before I figure out how not to." She stood very still. Outside, snow was beginning to fall against the narrow windows of the hall, and the torches burned gold against the dark stone, and she thought of all the ways she had imagined this place would break her. "Why?" she asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "Because I think I stopped seeing you as a captive somewhere around the third week," he said, "and I don't know what that makes me, but I know what it means." Lira had survived war. She had survived chains and cold iron, and the particular loneliness of being called less than what she was. She had not expected to survive this. The simple, devastating plainness of being seen by someone who had the power to look away and chose not to. She crossed the room. She took the letter from his hands. She set it in the fire. "Then figure out," she said. "I'll help." And for the first time since the night the chains went on her wrists, she was not afraid of what came next, because for the first time she would not be facing it alone. The war did not end that winter, but something else did. The idea that she was spoils. She had never been a prize to be claimed. She had been a person waiting to be recognized. And in the cold hall at the foot of the Dravik Mountains, with snow on the windows and a burned letter in the grate, she finally was.